And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and today I have a topic that was too large for me to handle alone, so I'm joined by definitely someone who's in everyone's top 10 list of favorite Apex people, Mr. Vern Lee. Welcome back to the build phase.
I hope I am because there aren't even 10 people on the group. So, hey guys, it's your boy Mad Squabbles, better known as Vern Lee. I'm having fun with Mr. Ben today, and I am happy.
All right, so this is directly about the versus community, but kind of, I think this is going to maybe be a bit of an ethical discussion. So we're going to talk about what, if anything, we owe to each other. This spun out of disagreement. Maybe that's even too strong a word. This spun out of two different perspectives on how we can best help new players in our community. So the core motion that we're going to be talking about today is, do experienced players have an obligation to help new players in versus? And Vern, I'm going to go ahead and let you lay out your case.
So, I guess I should be considered an experienced player. My perspective is this: when you use the word obligation, the first word that comes to mind is a duty. And as a competitive player, my objective is to win tournaments, to perform as well as I can at tournaments. That kind of creates a conflict of interest when it comes to trying to help the community be as good as possible at the game by giving them as much information as I can and explaining as many strategies as I possibly can for them to improve. I definitely don't think that anybody owes anyone that. What I can say is that I believe that as a community, the competitive players, including myself, go above and beyond to help the community to not only understand the game, but also to take steps to improve in the game. And I also believe that it really comes down to what you want to do as a player. I don't think we're obligated to do it, but I think if you want to help the community, however way you choose to do so, that's a great thing. And I think overall the community does a great job at that. I don't think we owe anybody anything.
I'm going to play a little bit of a game with words here because I largely agree with you that nobody is obligated to do anything for anybody else. Nobody's entitled to anyone else's time. Like in a very real sense, I'm not like obligated to feed my children. I could just choose not to. Now, I would think that people would say, "Hey, that's ethically abhorrent. Like you absolutely should feed your children." And that's kind of the way I'm approaching this. So, when I say that established players, experienced players owe something to the new player to help them out, I'm getting to that conclusion by a couple of ways, and neither is exactly direct because again, I agree with you, nobody's entitled to somebody else's time. But and anything I know, I learned because somebody who was better than me took the time to teach that thing to me. And I can't pay those people back directly, but what I can do is sort of pay it forward and try to help someone else who was, you know that Star Wars line, like, once I was the apprentice, but now I'm the master. I don't know if I want to call myself a master of anything other than silliness, maybe. But now that I'm experienced in the game, I'm in a position where I can help other people. And that leads to kind of the second pillar of my argument here, which is, if what we want is for the game to survive and thrive, we absolutely need to have people who right now don't know how to play versus turn into people who do know how to play versus. And again, nobody's actually should be forced to do that work, but if you love versus and you want to have tournaments to compete at, you have a vested interest. You have a selfish reason for trying to get those players onboarded. So that's my kind of hippy dippy egalitarian pay it forward part of my argument, as well as my, if you love versus, then you should invest in the community, selfish argument. So those are kind of the two pillars that I'm building to sort of support the foundation of the word obligation, because I agree with you, it is a little strong.
Okay. Well, let me try to tone it down a little bit. Obviously, what you said is quite reasonable. We all want the game to survive. And clearly, the online presence that took place mostly with you and C-Stacks during online tournaments and continuing to promote the game during the pandemic, that obviously had a huge effect on why this game is still alive. That's a form of helping the community, right?
Hmm.
And anybody that's doing content, they're helping the community. You know, Team Apex puts out content. We try to give our perspective on different cards and different strategies, and we're helping the community. We're giving of our time to do so. I guess the way I see it and where the conflict comes into place is not just helping the community, but how the community is helped. That's
Mhm.
where I think the conflict might be. During the rise of Team Apex, it was always said that we were secretive as far as how we chose to give out information or what information we chose to give out and what we chose to keep to ourselves. And I feel like sometimes, I really hate to use the word feel in a debate, but I feel like sometimes that was frowned upon. Whereas opposed from your end, I've even commented on this in the past. I feel like you take a more noble approach. And I'll admit, it is a more noble approach because I don't want everybody knowing what I think about everything. You are a lot more free with the information that you give. And the thing is, the information isn't necessarily factual, it's just your opinion, but you're more free with your opinion than we are. And I feel like either approach is fine. That I guess that's kind of where the conflict might kick in.
I think largely I agree with that. I don't remember exactly what show it was recently, but you said something to the effect of thanking me for me telling you what I thought about a particular meta. I don't want to misquote you, but it was something to that. And the tone that you were approaching it with was almost like, ha ha ha, like I knew more about what you were going to play. And that's fair. Like you know, well landed, I guess. But at the same time, that's sort of exactly what I'm trying to do. Like I'm very much a believer in the idea that a rising tide will lift all ships. So when I find a cool combo, I like the idea of putting it out into the community. And if somebody else can figure out a way to break that combo in half, that can be a fun conversation to have. I think the sticking point that I would sometimes run into during the rise of Apex, which like that's a goosebump inducing name for like a movie right there, The Rise of Apex. I'd watch that. Uh, there would be times where these debates would happen, and you would come in and say, "Oh, well, what you're saying is wrong, but I'm not going to tell you why." I'm not going to tell you what card I use, which is totally your prerogative. Like, no, you are not required to share that information. But if you want me to understand what you're talking about, it's hard for me to engage in a conversation where the data point that's making you disagree with me is one that's shrouded in mystery. So at least from my end, and maybe I didn't always express this clearly, historically speaking, but it was less about your approach and more about the like, oh, well, you're wrong, but I can't tell you why. And that was like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing here? So, yes, again, I want to be clear. I don't think anybody should have to share a deck list. Nobody should have to do these things. But I would argue that there is an ethical imperative, like for the health of the game, for us all to be willing to kind of help each other out to whatever degree we choose. Again, you're not required to.
Okay. I don't actually disagree with what you just said.
This is
I
like the
do
most
believe
agreeable debate ever.
it really is. So it might not even really be a debate. It
True.
might just be a discussion. But you know, it's just common sense to me. If we all love the game and you want the game to thrive, it makes sense to do whatever you can to help. Now I know there are like even if you look at the most competitive players in the game, the guys that go to most of the tourneys, they usually communicate with the rest of the community in some way, some less than others, but the goal is to help people improve. And a lot of the competitive players even talk to each other about what they think about the new cards and things of that nature. I think that's all great for the game. But allow me to take you back to when we first started it. I remember when we first started commenting on in the versus 2PCG community on Facebook. I don't feel like there was a lot of help coming. Like it was like, no, you guys are wrong. No, X-23 is not going to beat Thor. This and that and the other. And we just had to say, okay, well, we'll try to figure this out. And I never felt like that was incorrect, right? I didn't think that it was wrong for someone to say, well, we don't agree with you guys and we're not going to, go into it. Even if they did go into why they didn't agree, okay, now it's up to me to prove you guys wrong, or it's up to me to figure out if what you guys are saying is true. Like that's always the way we approached it. We didn't expect anyone to provide us with any deck lists or any card combos to disprove what we're saying. We just moved forward. I guess I might as well reference the discussion that took place last week where I don't remember the exact comment I made. I think I there was a new member, which welcome to the community. I think his name is Bum Rush Banger. We're happy to have you. Well, he was constantly asking for guest lists. Guest lists. Sorry, I'm planning a graduation party. Deck lists. And it was like, okay, how many deck lists are you gonna ask for in a period of a couple of days? So my perspective has always been you get better by building decks on your own. That's been my perspective. Is you get better by playing it and trying it and figuring out, okay, this doesn't work. What do I need to do to make it work? My commentary was, hey, try building, something on your own, and then you'll be able it'll accelerate your learning curve. That is not the exact way I said it, but that's what I meant. And I truly believe that. And I got some backlash from some of the new players and some of the older players. And my whole thing was, what do you expect me to do? I'm just trying to help them in my way. So, in my opinion, we all have different thought processes and how this should go, how we should help. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the way you choose to do so. If you want to give out deck lists without any real instruction, that's fine. If you want to give your perspective on the best way to learn, that's fine. If you want to give whole strategies for how someone should learn, that's fine as well. And if you don't want to say anything, I believe that's also okay. That's the way I look at it.
Okay. Yes, I agree that all of those choices are okay. Everybody's allowed to learn in whatever way they want to, help in whatever way they want to or not. In the universal sense of it, nobody should have to spend their time helping somebody else. And I think Jason made a good point about when somebody asks for a deck list, it's not like asking for a deck list in Hearthstone where there's 50 different sites, they all have 12 copies of the same deck or more, and it's kind of a Google search away. Whereas in Versus, a lot of times deck lists are photographs of submitted deck lists at events, or they might be on the Versus browser, or maybe somebody just took a picture of the cards on their playmat and put it on Facebook. Like it's a lot harder, it's a little more labor intensive to provide somebody with a deck list in this game than a lot of other card games. So, and new players to Versus might not know that. So I want to give these people a little bit of charity, but I can kind of understand where you're coming from. It's like, how many like once somebody gives you the website for the first deck list, don't you know where to look now to some degree a little bit? I think at the beginning of what you were saying there, you had said something to the effect of the best way to learn how to build decks is you build decks, try it out, fail, learn from that failure, and you keep doing it. And I think that's totally valid. I just think maybe the noun in that sentence should be I. If that could be the best way how you personally, Vern, learned to play verses and build decks, but that same type of iterative process might not be as useful for someone else. And I come from an era before getting decks off the internet was kind of a commonplace thing. In fact, in old verses, if you were a net decker, that was really kind of like frowned upon. And I've come to the idea that like that's just silly. If there's proven deck lists out there, if there's decks that have topped events, so we know that they work, looking at those as a new player kind of helps you understand. Maybe you don't know why every single card's there, and maybe some of it won't make sense, but you know that somebody who does know how to play the game put these cards together and piloted it to success. So there are things to be learned there. Now, I don't think deck lists alone are good enough. You need to couple looking at deck lists with an iterative process like you suggested. I think that's probably better, a blending of the two for most people. But everybody's going to kind of learn in their own way. And if somebody wants to look at deck lists and that works for them, I think that's totally fine. But again, no individual player is obligated to go find or provide deck lists for anybody other than from the kind of like altruistic sense of sort of paying it forward in the same way that we all sort of learn the game. Except for, I guess, you guys. You're saying there wasn't a lot of help when you got started.
Obviously, when we first started, the Discord didn't exist.
True.
So that we have to say that because it wasn't the same situation. Like we we didn't always have a podcast. I used to write articles on our page and then post it in the group. So it's a completely different situation. But I don't know if you remember, I used to post deck lists all the time. I just didn't think that was the best way to do it. I even have a deck list that's about to be featured coming out soon. So I don't have any problem putting out certain deck lists. That's not an issue to me. I guess it just seemed like there were a lot of deck lists in a rapid fire situation. I'm like, okay, I don't know why you're asking so many deck lists so quickly. But here's my suggestion on how to improve faster. And here's the thing, right? You are correct. There are multiple different ways to learn. Some people learn visually. Some people learn by trying and failing. Some people are able to learn by looking at someone else fail. Everybody learns differently. I just wanted to offer my perspective on what I thought would help him improve quicker. And here's the thing, right? He might not even want to be a competitive player. He might just want to look at some decks, throw some things together, and play some games. And if that's the case, his whole approach to it might be completely different from mine. So I have to concede that. But I was just trying to give him my personal opinion. I didn't want it to come off as some fact. It's just the way I think.
I think at least some amount of what's at work here is kind of similar to the whole groupthink conversation, or let me rephrase that. The whole groupthink axle me and you got wrapped around not too long ago. Uh, Having a conversation like this, I think we can both kind of go, hey, well, wait, what was that? That sounds unreasonable, and get clarity in real time. Whereas over text and Discord, when there's 10 different people talking, and maybe I didn't understand the tone of what you said and read it more stridently, or whatever the misunderstanding is, things have a way of going off the rails in text-based conversations that, like, when you're actually talking to somebody face, well, I guess we're not face to face, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it's much easier for us to get to the bottom of what we actually disagree about here. And really, I think it is just completely, I think it's just misunderstanding of tone. Based on what you've said here, I agree with all of that. And I remember looking at the Discord when you made that initial post and thinking like, whoa, 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 slow down. I don't agree with that at all. So, I mean, I think the only thing that changed is the phrasing pretty much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I have a I don't know. Sometimes it seems like the way I speak, whether it's positive or negative, can get a strong reaction from people. And
Hmm.
when I'm doing it in written form, you're not able to hear my voice inflection. You're not able to
Yes.
hear the smile in my face. So there's a little. Obviously, there's chances for someone misconstruing exactly what you mean. But I just wanted to make sure that my point was understood a little bit better. Obviously, Team Apex wants to serve the community because that's what we do. It takes, as you know, the man that covers like 80 games. It takes time and effort. It takes rearranging your schedules and trying not to anger the wife and the kids to get this work done. But we do it for a good cause, and we definitely want the community to not only grow but also improve. I want to see more people at the competitive table,
Hmm.
but I'm not trying to help you beat me. That's the way I look at it.
See, I don't, that doesn't frighten me. I watched a YouTube video not too long ago where there were a couple of different martial arts coaches talking, and one of the guys talked about how he felt like he had to be good enough that he could beat all of his students, or else he didn't deserve to be their coach. And the other guy was like, no, man, you're completely missing the point. Like, your job is to make them better. It doesn't matter if you're better than they are or not. It's that you're trying to help them, you're adding value to their skill set. And that's sort of the way I approach my work on the show, is like I'm trying to add value to everybody else's game. Now, if I was super, super competitive and I really wanted to win an event and I thought I had some secret tech that nobody else had figured out, Yeah, I might not talk about that on the show, like if I was in that mindset. And I think and it sounds like you lean more that mindset like as a default than I do. And I think that's fine. That's valid.
I mean, I've said this many times, and I really mean it. I don't know if you guys think I'm joking when I say this. I don't really have secret tech.
I don't think anybody does in this game. Like the card pools are
You
just
know,
so
like,
open, you know?
but even like, I'm not. If we were talking about old versus, I was way more closer to a combo player in that game. Like I had like a crazy deck that utilized Candor to, and it was basically a bunch of crazy parts. Like it was like combined evil medical school and um Team Superman cards that weren't being played at all and things of that nature. It was this weird combination of cards that basically a one drop could stun pretty much anybody on the board by turn six. That was the type of stuff I did in Oververse. In this game, for the most part, I'm just trying to beat your face in, and it's not any special combo that I'm doing it with. So when people say it's about hiding secret tech, it's not really that. You know, maybe you were talking about some of my other team members that might apply. But for me, I just don't feel like I should have to tell you exactly how to do something. I think it's better and more valuable if you do the work yourself. So that's really where it comes from, more along the lines of it's not just about making sure that whoever's competing with me doesn't know what I'm doing. I just want you to discover it for yourself the way I did and come up with your own conclusions.
Sure, I think probably the secret tech reputation is born out of those earlier years when I can't remember what meta it was, but I feel like me and you were having a discussion about Black Bolt, and I was talking about his weaknesses in the format, or maybe it was his strengths. I can't remember. I feel like you probably were on the pro Black Bolt side because I know you guys really like that guy, but I mean, I like him too. Uh, but whatever it was, I was either criticizing or praising him, and you were like, "No, dude, you're wrong about that," but I'm not going to tell you why. And I remember getting so irritated. It's like, okay, man, like cool conversation, I guess. So I think that's where that secret tech rep comes from.
Hey, I remember that because I think when you made that podcast, you were more irritated with me in that podcast than you were with the Outriders take that we did. I won't lie, it was funny, man. And that was a time where sale wasn't available, so we weren't really doing any pods. And by the time I was able to respond, I was like, man, it's been so long. There's no point bringing this up again.
Yeah, I remember that. I
Um,
was disappointed.
I will say, since we're here, I feel like you are correct when it comes to that. I shouldn't have ended it on that note. I should have said something because you're right. If you're going to make a claim, you should back it up. What I wanted to do was try to back it up by actually playing it. And now I don't even know if he's crept out so much that it would even matter. I
Yeah.
really don't know. But I did play Black Bolt differently than most do. So that was my thought process. Like I think that was the difference where you were saying everybody knows what Black Bolt does. You know, you're gonna play Cypher and get a bunch of stuff in the KO pile right away and level them up that way. And my whole stance was no, that's not how I play it. You don't have to play it like that. But I didn't really want to explain it because my thought process was, hey, I might use this, and if people know about it because it's so different from what everybody else is doing with them, you know, it might give them an advantage.
Hmm.
So that was my thing. Maybe I should just shut up. Sometimes you got to keep your mouth closed.
Well, and I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to being proven incorrect. I didn't figure out the mayor PD combo until I can't even think of what the made up handle was, but
Get a bomb.
Metabomb until Metabomb made that Reddit post about it. And so it's like, okay, well, look, here is a clear counter for the Outriders. I didn't find it. Fair play, and I try to own it when I get things wrong. So part of if I just came out and sort of said every card is bad, most of the time I'd be right because it's only the kind of best of the best cards that see a lot of play in competitive. So with most card games, if you just kind of crap on everything, you know, 80, 85, 90% of the time you're going to be right. but that's not that much fun. Like I think it's a lot more fun to actually be honest and to make big bold statements and go, I think this is going to be great. I think this is going to be terrible. And then yeah, some percentage of the time you get it wrong. And that sort of comes with the territory, but it's more interesting as a conversation when people are like, this is the best card ever, than like these cards are all equally okay.
You know, see, that's the thing, right? I think that Team Apex as a whole just simply doesn't agree with that. When you say 80 to 90% of the cars aren't good, we don't believe that. Not that high of a percentage. Of course, there are some cars that are obviously these are better, but we also think that some things are just a little bit unexplored because there is, I think people get comfortable with what they're familiar with and they just go with that. And when you have a game that has like almost 300 main characters, that's understandable. So that's kind of where we push back on it. Like, no, there's other stuff you can do. Look into it. I remember when Match first came out, we're like, this card is great. And everybody was like, eh. So, and sometimes we're wrong. Like, what card did we say recently that we really like that is terrible? I think it was the new Alpha card, the new 7 drop.
Yeah, he didn't
We
end up
like
being
that
very
card.
good.
That card is absolutely terrible.
I liked him until I played him in a few games and it just never worked out.
It made
So
me feel like I didn't understand this game. Like, how did I think this card was going to be good?
let
But
me
that's the fun part
clarify.
about it.
When I say like only 20% of the cards are good, that's very imprecise language. That's me kind of taking a few different ideas and synthesizing them down in a way that's maybe not the most clear. So let me break this down a little bit. What I'm referring to is specifically within the tournament space. So at the kitchen table, in casual mode, I think almost every card in the game is good enough to see some play when you're just messing around with your friends. Not every card. Some of them are. Kid Kaiju is a pretty rough main character, even in casual. But for the most part, everything can see play at the kitchen table. And if that's the way you enjoy versus, that's totally valid. But what I was specifically thinking about there is the competitive table. And I think about 10 to maybe 20% of the card pool is about all we tend to see at the tournament table when it comes to main character selection, when it comes to supporting character selection. Uh, we just are, when it matters, when there's money on the line, people are going to gravitate towards the best of the best, the cream of the crop. And it doesn't mean those cards that are like a solid B plus are bad. It's not fair for me to say that only the cards that see play at tournaments are good, quote unquote. No, these are like the best of the good cards, and there's plenty of cards that are good that maybe just aren't like they're just a few percentage points less effective or less efficient than the ones that people put into their tournament decks. But it is, I will totally concede that it is unfair of me to call those cards bad. That wasn't my intent. That was sloppy.
All right, so here's a question for you then. I know we've gone way off topic at this point, but I
A
think
little
we
bit, yeah.
don't disagree enough. I don't think we disagree enough to keep going down that road.
Fair.
There's a player that has won tournaments with cards like Defenders Namor, cards that okay, let me phrase it. Let me not do it that way. When a player wins a tournament with a card that you didn't think was very good, does that not change your thought process on the card itself? Or even if they just do very well, doesn't that open your thought process up to say, hey, maybe I was wrong about this card? Because honestly, I feel like for the most part, that stuff is written off as flukes. As a whole, I'm not going to say you specifically, but as a whole.
So I think it could be. It could be, hey, I was wrong about that card. Actually, I was playing this wrong all along. And an example of that, I think, would be the way I tested Red Skull for the Benchwarmers format. Like, I've been pretty open that I went in with a bias that, like, this guy isn't going to work. He's never going to see his cubes consistently. And I played like 3 games and didn't see my cubes and went, oh, I was right. But I wasn't right. I was wrong. That certainly is a thing that can happen, but that's not the only thing that could happen. It could be a fluke. I don't like saying that. Generally speaking, I'm not going to take anybody else's tournament accomplishment and write it off as a fluke because I think that's like kind of poor form to a degree. Although I know I've said things that I think you took that way, like talking about Outriders. So poor speed on my part. I never meant to imply that your accomplishments were a fluke. But I do think that there can be specific realities within the meta, within the decks that showed up, within the players that showed up, that can explain why a unpredictable main character or a set of unpredictable supporting character tools within a deck might perform better under very specific circumstances than they would anywhere else. That can be a thing that can happen. It's not going to be every time. The benchwarmers example, sometimes it is I just get something wrong or the community as a whole gets something wrong, but sometimes there's other mitigating factors. And in reality, there may be kind of a mixture of both more often than like given what you said with how many main characters there are, the likelihood that somebody's going to find a hidden gem that was written off gets higher and higher all the time. But I don't think that increases the likelihood that a card like Thing or a card like Scorpion, even if somebody took Scorpion to an
Oh
event and did
God.
well, that's not going to change my opinion about Scorpion being a generally speaking bad main character. But that's like an unfair example too, because he's so obviously has problems. Um,
It's not gonna happen, man.
it gets murkier
I'm
when we
sorry.
start looking at main characters like, Buffy was one that came up a bunch when we were talking earlier. I love Buffy. I've played Buffy in tournaments, but I will still admit that like you have to work a little harder to make her work, and she has some big problems and big weaknesses depending upon like what's out there in the meta in a way that other main characters might not have that. So even if somebody does well with her, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's better than like, B minus or wherever she would fall on a tier list. Does that make sense? Does that sound reasonable to you?
No, that's true, right? And so when it comes to like tiering main characters, first of all, our game now has formats. So you're not your character is not always going to be in the same tier unless your character is like Dark Phoenix or Pro Registration Spider-Man. They're always tier one. It seems like no matter what. But some of these characters are going to fluctuate depending on what the format is and if there are any new cards that have come out that support them. I'll
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and give you an example, right? So for duality, which we tested extremely hard for because we thought we were going to Texas before they postponed it. I thought Harrigan was going to be good in duality. In my mind, Harrigan was like tier two, and our tiers are different. I'll explain that one day, but whatever. Tier two for us means it's a contending main character,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a favorite, but it's a contending main character. But after going through testing, he wasn't good because he didn't have the consistency that he needed, right? So that dropped him down. Sometimes I feel like the community as a whole has their mindset on where a main character is in the tiers, and it doesn't change no matter what. That may not be the case, but that's how it feels. That's how it comes across.
Well, I would agree with you in criticizing that. I think that's just wrong. I think people of like rational mind and good intentions, like your tier list might be more dynamic than mine. So maybe you move stuff around more than I do, and mine's kind of a little more static across different formats. But if my tier list never changes, like if I'm just saying like, oh, these guys are always good no matter what happens in the card pool, that's just not true. I don't know how somebody could defend that position. I do think the idea that going like using Thor as kind of an offhand example of a main character that's always strong, even if Thor doesn't happen to be strong in the format that we're talking about, I can see people reaching for him as that example just because of his reputation. And that could lead to some of this confusion. Maybe where somebody thinks, well, wait, Thor isn't good in this meta. What are you talking about? Well, okay, I didn't mean him specifically. I just meant generic strong character. And that was the example I used, but it was a bad example. So something like that could happen maybe, but generally speaking, I agree with you. Tier lists have to be tailored specifically to the meta, and if you really want to get down to it, each person should kind of have their own personal tier list for each meta and set of main characters because the main characters that I'm going to perform really well with in a format might not be the same as you. Now there's probably bound to be a lot of overlap, but maybe I'm better with Outriders than you are or that's a terrible example. Everybody's good with Outriders, but you know what I mean. Like there's going to be some fluctuation there between the pilot as well. And that's the kind of thing that probably doesn't get factored into the sort of tier list that gets posted on Facebook or talked about on podcasts because that's just a little too narrow. But as a player, I do think you should be thinking about that sort of thing as you approach a competitive event.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Which main character is more broken? Outriders or Mantle Loki?
Oh man. Um man, they both do such unfun things, but in like such different ways. Um I don't know if Outriders is actually the worst main character, but because of how they do their thing right at the beginning, uh, it probably feels worse to play against them most of the time. But then again, man, there's nothing worse than like fighting really hard to get to a game and then just having it flip on you the way Loki can kind of flip at the end and just take everything away from you. Like that feels pretty terrible too. Um, no, even now that the like Kate into Cloak line is public knowledge thanks to John Phillips, I still probably think Outriders are going to create more negative play experiences than Loki because of they start doing their broken oppressive thing right away from turn one. Yeah. Okay, that's what do you think?
Having been on the end of both situations, they both suck.
True.
Loki, I think my first match in Swiss against Mitch was actually broadcasted or streamed at Midwinter 2023. And I was playing Cloak and Dagger, for anybody that doesn't know. And when I tell you I was steamrolling this dude's deck, I really was like just running over him. And then he leveled up. He had one wound left to go. And the game just shut down from that point. The complete flip that Loki does is emotionally more painful because he can take a game that looked like it was completely over and just it's still completely over, but it's because he's in control now.
Yeah.
So he's not changing it. He's just changing the direction of the L. Outriders, I don't know. For me, and maybe it's because when we were testing, I was the main Outrider player.
Hmm.
I enjoyed playing against the Outriders at first because for the most part I was playing Outriders, and playing Outriders soured me on Outriders from that point of view because I felt so unfulfilled playing them. If that makes any sense.
Oh, it totally does.
Like the only time I've ever played Outriders in a competitive situation was during the side event where we were basically it was the side event at Midwinter where everybody was playing the broken characters.
Hmm.
Other than that, I refuse to play Outriders at a competitive event. And I mean for eternity. So I don't know, man. For me, I actually enjoy trying to take the Outriders down. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe that's what it is. I got a problem. I got a complex. I wanna kill bugs or something. I don't know.
Well, I always really enjoy playing board games at extremely high difficulty levels. When the Marvel Champions expansion came out for the Guardians of the Galaxy, like the whole community drowned themselves in tears because it was too hard. It was so hard. Okay. I had a play group that I played it with where the difficulty was not fun, where it was not enjoyable. But when I played it on my own and when I played it with Wit, we really liked how challenging it was. So I totally understand the player, like the mentality of, hey, this thing is hard, so that makes me want to do it. That's like such a human motivation. Like, there's a mountain, let's climb it. And looking at challenges in our card game, like Dark Phoenix, like Outriders, like any example, any major powerful thing, being the person who played something that wasn't the powerful thing and took down the powerful thing, I think is rewarded in our community. People think it's cool. People, pile praise on top of the folks who are able to figure that stuff out, and it can be a motivating thing. So. And I want those experiences to exist within verses. I do not want a version of this game where we're all fighting each other with grizzly bears. Just two mana two-twos that don't do anything. Like, I'm not interested in that. I do want interesting powers, and part of making interesting powers means they have to be asymmetrical. Sometimes they have to be big and flashy, and that's all awesome. It's just I wish we could also acknowledge that when, hey, we ran this experiment and it's kind of not fun anymore. Now, maybe that shouldn't mean that a card has to be banned forever. And to a large degree, I think featured formats have kind of helped with this, where they can play around with the card pool and maybe give certain cards a timeout after they've been suffocating and oppressive to the meta for too long. I really like what they're working with as far as incursion and this growing list of banned cards. And the reason I want these things to happen is because I want to play the B minus cards. I want to play the C cards. I want to be able to dig deeper into my binder and essentially be forced to dig deeper into my binder and not always play the absolute cream of the crop. Now, of course, we can do that. Everybody has the choice to do that, and at the kitchen table I will. But when it comes to competitive events, I don't think it's a fair to say to somebody like, yeah, you're going to go pay money to play in this event and try to compete for money, uh, and if you don't like playing these cards, we'll just play different ones. Well, hold on. At an event, getting that W is the most important thing, and there is kind of pressure to deal with and have to play against all of this like tip of the spear type card stuff. So I wish there was a little more acknowledgement on the part of like Upper Deck, and I think Incursion is largely their attempt to try to acknowledge this. But just hey, sometimes Danny and Ben make cards that are too awesome. They're just a little bit too good, and that's okay. Good. I like that they're taking chances, but maybe Dark Phoenix can go away for a little while because she's just exhausting to deal with. Like that's kind of my stance on all that.
I think she's about to go away because I think people are about to play her, but
Yeah.
she's going to go away at some point. Maybe after Gen Con. That's the way I see it. Wait, I might have said too much. I'm doing non-Apex like things.
I think the idea that people know that Dark Phoenix is good is not considered secret tech anymore, man.
Yeah, but
Well,
you know
hey,
what's crazy? Nobody has played her yet. And in three incursion events, nobody has played her.
that is pretty wild. I mean, I guess
You
that
know,
could be a testament to how fast some of the really broken stuff is, though. Like, it does take a little, she does require a little more setup, kind of like Loki, like we were talking about before. I think Outriders are more painful to deal with, but I would agree with you that Loki is also very painful. Uh, Maybe that's kind of the approach people have taken towards Incursion, where they're going with the more immediate response, like triage type cancerous stuff.
I think Gen Con is going to be very interesting. I think there are a lot of main characters that can compete at Gen Con. So I'm interested in seeing the variety of decks that are going to be there.
Yeah.
Or if it's just going to be a Dark Phoenix TVA fest. We'll see.
TVA is another card. That card has not been around long enough. I shouldn't start hating on it yet, but oh my goodness, that card is crazy.
I don't think it's going to be around long enough and encouraging for you to hate it. I
Uh,
think that's going to be destroyed very soon.
Dude, I had a couple games where I was like, this card's really fun. And then, like, the third or fourth game, I was like, oh no, this card is a significant problem. This is going to create so many unfun games. Well, hey, all right, man. We had kind of a narrow topic and we've drifted far afield from it. So before we stumble into the next rabbit hole of things to talk about, I want to give you a chance to plug, promote, shout out all your stuff. But do you have any kind of last words or closing statements with regard to the topics we discussed today before you do your shout outs?
Okay, well, when it comes to helping the community, I just want to say that has been my goal for the better part of 4 or 5 years since even before Team Apex was officially formed. I am for helping the community. I just want I just want people to accept that everyone has a different idea about how that should be done. And I think that that is actually a plus because we get so many different perspectives when it comes to health. So we have your way of doing it, which is, hey, this is what I think unequivocally, and I'm going to say what I think, and I'm going to give you as much information as I can. I believe that builds a stronger competitive vibe, and I believe that builds a strong community. And then there's us who, in public, will say certain things about what we think about the cards, and then maybe in private, we'll say other things. And then we may take a more, hey, we'll prove it to you when we play you situation. You got Buckeye, which just does all types of crazy, interesting things that may not help you get better, but may show you different cool stuff. You know, you
Hmm.
got Bert, who was like concise and he basically just talks about whatever he wants to at the time, and that's it. And then we have game ambassadors. You know, Bill Faye, Jason Roosevelt is a mentor. Ralph from our team is a mentor. We have people that have made multiple types of apps. You know, we have the Pocket Versus app. We got the Versus TCG browser. So I think as a whole, we do a great job of helping in our own way. And I'll just leave it at that.
I have nothing to add. I think that was very well said. So I guess let's what do you want to plug, promote, shout out here at the end of the show, sir?
I want to shout out the Bill Faze Network. I appreciate being here. Talking to you was always fun. You know, we collab probably twice a year now at this point. Um, so thanks for having me. As far as what Team Apex has coming up, I'm going to be releasing a tier list for the duality event. The duality. Ugh, what's wrong with my mouth? It must be too late. I'm getting old. The duality format event for the regional that's coming up in Texas. Anybody that's on my Patreon knows I've always said I'm not doing a tier list if it's like the complete multiverse. I've changed my mind. I've actually concocted a tier list for all the duality, which that's the vast majority of the main characters in the game. And normally that would only be on Patreon, but we're gonna release it publicly for everybody to hear. So if you are interested in something like that, stay tuned in the coming weeks. We'll be releasing that in parts after I do them. So Team Apex for the win, or Team Apex FTW. That's where you can find us on Patreon. Uh, for the Patreon, behind the paywall stuff. And then, always stay tuned for the normal Team Apex stuff, which is actually different from what you get on Patreon. But I'll be keeping everybody posted on that shortly. Think it'll be fun.
Well, great, man. As always, I appreciate when you take time out of your day to come tell me why I'm wrong about stuff on my own show. These conversations are always a ton of fun. So just thank you again for hanging out, man. And I agree with you. I think you and Team Apex do a lot of good for the community, even when I poke and prod and tease sometimes. So as always, you're welcome back anytime. And I'm really glad we were able to make this happen, man.
Hey, that's what makes it fun. I like the back and forth, man.
Absolutely.
In case you haven't noticed.
Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. So until next time, go win some games.